Yes.
In the Medusa frequency, was there any particular inspiration for that device, the head zapping machine? And did you mean to suggest anything more by it than simply a kind of symbol of the desperation people suffering from Blighters Rock will go to?
No, I don't remember. Can't remember when I thought of the head zapping machine, but what came, the development of the Medusa frequency, the first element was a particular olive tree that I saw on the island of Paxos. It looked as if a woman had, or a goddess had stepped out of it and left the emptiness behind her. And I used that in a story called Dark Oliver, which was published in the Observer magazine, the Sunday magazine of the Observer newspaper. And I never had a photograph of that tree. I had two photographs of another olive tree that I used to look at a lot. And from there to the head of Orpheus, I don't know. I think I have one of my first. Bear with me a moment. I brought it with me. Yeah, it should be in this lot. Yeah. This doesn't really answer your question, but it's a fun excursion. Yeah. How are we doing for time? Listen, I'll tell you something. If nobody stops me, I'm going to read you 7 pages here. Anybody want to give me any trouble here? All right. What this is some of the background thought out of which the Medusa frequency came. And again, you know, it's a number of things from a number of places. So I have it divided up into, do I have it divided up into? Yeah, I started little subheads and so forth. And believe me, this does get to the head of Orpheus in due course. The sorcerer. Certain images persist in the mind. The famous drawing of the so-called sorcerer in the cave of Les Trois Frères in France is one of them. I know it only from sketches and photographs in books. That doesn't matter. The numinous image seeks us out. It finds its way to us through eons of darkness. The antlered figure of the dancing man-beast, at the same time man and beast and god, priest and sacrifice, hunter and prey, sorcerer, magician, scientist, artist, how he looks at us. A masked human, certainly, but those eyes, the stare of them. Night is in him. Orpheus is in him. The burlesque altar. This begins with an entry in a catalog at the Tate Gallery. Number 44, Kenodoxus Eisenheimer Flugelaltar, 1981, mixed media, 310 by 420 by 260 centimeters, private collection, Switzerland. Inspired by Grunewald's celebrated folding altarpiece for a church at Isenheim, now in the Museum of Colmar, not far from Basel, this work was first shown at the Gallery Bischofberger, Zurich, in December 1981. The exhibition, by the way, was the work of Jean Tinguely, the Swiss sculptor. Tinguely's humor is nowhere more evident than in this burlesque of a medieval altarpiece. Whirling feathers, skulls with snapping jaws, a broken ski, and a statue of a praying woman moving from side to side are just some of the absurd effects he's introduced from a catalogue of the Tinguely exhibition at the Tate Gallery, London, 8 September, 28 November 1982. In 1982, I saw Tinguely's altarpiece at the Tate, and it's given me a lot to think about ever since. Whatever Tinguely intended, and this, I don't know if you're all familiar with Tinguely's work, but he does these mechanical things that are very amusing, and it's all very witty and dry and iconoclastic in its effect. Whatever Tinguely intended, the Kenodoxus Eisenheimer Flugelaltar is not a burlesque for the simple reason that you can't burlesque an altar. It can't be done. You can't send up an altar. You can't make a joke altar however hard you try. You can do it with old locomotive wheels and frying pans and Coke bottles and a rubber statue of Donald Duck, and still it's an altar. Do it how you like. It'll always be the real thing. As soon as you define a special field of attention, all the gods and demons and all the creatures of myth that ever were and ever will be, yes, even gods and demons unborn, jump into it, and the altar is real. There's nothing in the world realer. Why do the gods and demons jump in? They require to be taken notice of. They want a reciprocity of awareness. They're not mental constructs. The god of the Hottentots is not a projection of the Hottentot psyche, nor is the god of the Anglicans a projection of the English psyche. Oh yes, the Hottentots dress God up in their way and the English in theirs. But the gods, whatever they are, and I mean all gods of all times and places, have not been invented by us. They were here before we arrived, and they require our recognition. And if you define a special field of attention, they jump in. It's happened to me that I've become a special field of attention. And because of that, certain obsessions, certain ideas have taken hold of me. For example, there are particular heads that I think about a lot. The head of Orpheus, the head of the kraken, that great cephalopod that shudders in the blackness of the ultimate deep, the head of Medusa, and Vermeer's head of a young girl. My head is full of ideas about these heads. They mostly aren't ideas that I can do anything with. Most of the time I can't get stories out of them. For long stretches, all I can do is think about them. The raging of the head of Orpheus, diapason, a full volume of various sounds in concord, but more than that, a palimpsest, one image, one word on top of another, one cry by solitary night or crowded passion on top of another, cut vertically by silence, showing in section uneven striations of sound, compressed, geological, cries, silence, blue or red, or tasting of honey or bronze or salt, sounding of Tibetan monks, of humpback whales, of Monteverdi, where the green goes darker, darker, down to deep, deep blue, on top of another. This raging, this palimpsest of sound, this diapason of time, various times not at first perceptibly in concord. The raging of the head of Orpheus is not to be understood. That is not the nature of it. An interview with the head of Orpheus. A head was found stranded at low tide on the south bank of the Thames, about 3/4 of a mile west of Putney Bridge. It was found by John Orff, 11 of Fulham. Orff says that he was just mucking about along the bank when he heard a voice which seemed to come from among the rocks near the water's edge. I heard someone shout, "Oi!" he reports. And when I looked around to see who it was, I saw what looked like a stone all covered with green slime, only I could see its mouth moving. I went over to it and it said, "Oi!" again. I said to it, "Well, what is it you want?" It said to me, "Give us a kick, will you?" "What for?" I said. "Get us back in the water," it said. I said, "Is the rest of you buried in the mud or what?" It said, "Never you mind about the rest of me. That's none of your affair. There's only just my head here, and all I want is for you to kick me back into the water. Just do it the same as you'd kick a football." "I don't like to kick anybody in the head," I said. "Well, there's nothing else for me to kick, is there?" it said. "I'll have to think about this," I said to it. I had a bag with me, so I picked the head up by its hair and put it in the bag and started off for home. But the head was shouting and cursing all the time, and a policeman stopped me, and then I had to go to the police station with him. PC, Police Constable Orson Footer, records the following exchange. Footer, "Can I have your name, please?" Head, head of Orpheus. Footer, "Can I have your Christian name, please?" Head, head of is my Christian name, Orpheus is my surname. Footer, "Where do you live?" Head, "No fixed address." Footer, "Have you been picked up before?" Head, "Yes." Footer, "For what?" Head, "Consultation." Footer, "What kind of consultation would that be?" Head, "Oracular." Footer, "And where did this take place?" Head, "Lesbos." At this point, PC Footer consulted his superiors. The head was transferred first to the Vice Squad, then to the British Museum. Perseus and Fay Ray. For this, I really would like to do a Cockney accent, but I'm no good at accents. All I can do is make Perseus sound different from Fay Ray. When Perseus turned up at Fay Ray's place, he said, "Hello, missus, I'm Perseus." "What about it?" said Fay Ray. "Why have you come here?" "Looking for work, ain't I? You got any monsters hanging about, or maybe some ladies with snakes in her hair?" And if I did? Ah, said Perseus, rubbing his hands together. You'd see something then, missus. I'd make short work of 'em. You kill monsters, do you? Not off. And the ladies with snakes in their hair? Cut their heads off is what I usually do. Tell me about Medusa. Of course, she was really something. Know what I mean? No, I don't. When I first see her, she had her back to me. She was asleep. She was naked. She was lying on that rock starkers for anybody to see. What a shape on her. Of course, I'd like to have, you know, you'd like to have had her. When I just. Why didn't you then, a virile young man like you? Well, I was in a story, wasn't I? I mean, I couldn't just do as I liked. Bullshit, said Fay Ray. You mean Bullfinch? That's the bloke what wrote the story, isn't it? You're not even Greek. Why is that? Bullfinch wasn't Greek neither. You didn't want to make love with Medusa. You wanted to look at her, but you were afraid to do anything else. You weren't even man enough to look right at her. You had to look at her in a mirror. That's what I call kinky. Listen, mister, she'd have turned me to stone, wouldn't she? I had my instructions. I had my orders. I'd done what I was hired to do, didn't I? It was the wisdom goddess give me the shiny shield. If you're wise, she said, you won't look directly at her. You'll look at her image in my shining shield. It's truth, missus. That's what she told me. Winged sandals you had too, didn't you? Well, yes, I did. Hermes give me them. It's all wrote down like that in the story. I didn't have nothing to say about it, did I? All that technology to deal with one naked woman with snakes in her hair. I wonder what you'd have done if she'd been 50 feet high. That wasn't in the story, was it? It was in my story, though. A great black hairy gorilla, 50 feet high. You and him in the same story, eh? That's right. 50 feet high he was, that's right. Must have had a truly heroic thingy, eh? You mean his male member? That's it, I mean his willy. You mean his willy or his won't he? That's what I mean, his diddy or his dinny. He didn't have one. You might say he was all male member. All 50 feet of him? Begging your pardon, missus, but what did you do with him? We climbed skyscrapers and things like that. It was wonderful. I'd never known anything like it before, and it'll never happen again. There was only one of him, and now he's dead. I'll never forget him. Kong. Even his name has a melancholy resonance. You mean King Kong? Of course I mean King Kong. Whom else could I possibly mean? Well, he was like a doll, wasn't he? Like a puppet, and they moved him about, and he was only little. He couldn't help that, could he? He had a full-size hand, and there was a full-size head and shoulders. What a face he had. The first time I saw it rising above the trees, I almost fainted, even though I knew it wasn't real. But he was immense, even when he was little. He could transcend being an 18-inch puppet. When he took me in his hand and went up the side of the Empire State Building with me, I believed it, even though it was all happening in time-lapse photography with puppets, and the building was a model. How I cried when the airplane shot him down, my demon lover, my noble savage. And here I stand talking to you, a cheap little lady killer, a peeping Tom, a mirror trickster, a souvenir hunter. You know, missus, I could show you a really good time if you fancied a bit of slap and tickle. Oh, yes. Would you look at me in your mirror while we did it? Straight up, missus. You've no idea what sort of things I get up to with these winged sandals. I can do it hovering in the air, and you wouldn't believe the thrust they give. Can you make me believe you're holding me in one gigantic hand while we go up the Empire State Building? Maybe not, but I can do what he couldn't. Know what I mean? I know very well what you mean. But actually, that's not what I'm talking about. It's more a question of style. You don't like my style? Not really, no. Right, well, here's my card if you change your mind. Dial a hero. Sort of an escort service, is it? That's right, anything you fancy. Western heroes, flying aces, mythical, you name it. What if I ask for King Kong? Whatever you ask for, I'm what you get. Oh dear, that's what I was afraid of. Well, ta-da then, missus. Goodbye. We still got 20 minutes. Yeah.
Oh, in that case, tell me about the raven in the zoo and and all the colors that... Isn't that where you went from all the different colors?
The Raven? Yeah, well...
I mean, did you go to the zoo? And
oh, yeah, sure, I went to the zoo. Yeah. I have to keep reading because the best way, not everybody knows the story she's talking about. It's a short story called The Raven, and I'll just read, well, at least I'll read the beginning of it so you know what she's talking about. I'm particularly fond of that story. Reading time is 14 minutes and 30 seconds. Art is better than explanation. The Raven. One says a black time, but actually the black of things is all kinds of colors. Sometimes it's the gray rain light in an empty room. Sometimes it's the sound of one's own footsteps under yellow street lamps. Sometimes it's an unaccompanied cello from a long time ago. It was difficult to understand the reality of my days, that this was now my life that would last until my death, that I had closed a door and gone, that there was no going back, that no one was there anymore. No one was there because you don't just leave people, you leave a time, and the time wasn't there anymore. I wanted to talk to somebody about the black, so I went down into the underground, came up out of it on the long and windy escalator at Camden Town, walked up Parkway to Regent's Park, followed a footpath through green distances and the autumnal shouts of football players, and turned into a road in which a squad of trotting men in red T-shirts and green shorts came towards me, their leader chanting words to which they responded. The words were indistinct, probably not. There was a man, his name was Jack, he tried to swim across the black. The black was deep, the black was wide, he never reached the other side. The road took me to the zoo entrance where I entered, went past the apes and a little white clock tower and found the ravens. There were two of them perching on a sawed-off dead tree in their cage. When I took some grapes out of a bag, one of the ravens opened its wings and the whole outspread blackness of the bird suddenly appeared in front of me. Standing on well-worn and polished black feet, it folded its wings and stuck its bill through the chain-link mesh of the cage. It was a large black bill of clerical aspect, the upper mandible hooked over the lower with a long curving point that was like a fingernail that needed trimming. A little yellow sign on the cage showed the silhouette of a hand with a large piece bitten out. So I sidled away from the raven and dropped a grape through the wire mesh. The raven picked up the grape neatly between its upper and lower mandibles, walked a little way off with an old man walk, placed the grape on the concrete floor, tore it into 3 pieces and ate them one at a time. Then it went to its bath, a circular concavity in the floor. It sipped some water, lifted its head and stretched out its neck as it swallowed, and came back to the wire mesh. Its wet throat feathers were like a beard. Its purple-blue blackness was as precise as an engraving. Its shining black eye, when it blinked, showed a clear bluish-white disc like a little round mirror of skepticism. "How's it going?" I said to it, not speaking aloud, but with my mind. "Well, you know," said the raven, also not speaking aloud, "there's not a lot happening here." The cage was small, with neighbors on both sides. I think there was some kind of vulture in the cage to the left, some exotic corvid to the right. From time to time the vulture flapped its wings and lifted itself off its branch, then settled down again. The October day was warm and humid. People carried their coats and jackets over their arms. Someone stood next to me and pointed to the raven and said to a child, "See how tame it is." I looked down at the child, a boy of 3 or 4. His face was pale and sticky, like a bun that had been standing in the sun. His expression was doubtful, his eyes wild. The sky was gray, dead leaves rattled on the paving. In the distance, something screamed. "How can you live without flying?" I said to the raven. "How do you get through the days? How do you not go crazy?" The raven looked at me for a while. The little round eye mirror blinked like a camera shutter. "Lots of people live without flying," it said. "But you used to have the whole sky to move around in." "Wait a minute," said the raven. "What?" "How do I know I'm not talking to myself? Maybe I'm just imagining this conversation." "I've been thinking that very same thought," I said. "Tell me what to do to show you that I'm receiving you." Hold out your arms and flap them up and down. I held out my arms and flapped them up and down. What's that man doing? Said a passing child to its mother. Perhaps he's trying to get above himself, she said. I've given you a sign, I said to the raven. How about you? Walk in a circle round your bath if it's really you speaking to me. With its old man walk, the raven slowly walked round the bath. Then it came back to where I stood. You were saying, it said. Its voice in my mind had changed. It was all around me in vast and reverberant diapason, as if rebounding from the face of a black escarpment that ringed the horizon under a gray and primordial sky. It was a giant voice of supernatural power, and a thrill of fear went through me as the raven grew before my eyes. The cage in the zoo seemed to have faded away. The raven loomed over me like a black cliff, walking towards me on well-worn and polished black feet in the gray October afternoon. How could I have ever been such a fool as to speak to it as if I were its equal? The immense raven flashed its eye mirror, in which I saw only blankness. Its voice filled the sky. You were saying, it said. How do you not go crazy? I whispered in my mind. I have a lot to do. I'm busy all the time. Chorused the massed echoes from the black escarpment. What is it that you do? I do the black. Of course, the black. I'd come for the express purpose of talking to the raven about that very thing, and I'd forgotten all about it. When you say the black, I said, you mean different things at different times? And when you do the black, how do you do it? I just go with it. How do you do that? How do you just go with it? All kinds of ways and very, very far sometimes. How far? I was looking into the raven's left eye when I said that. Then the mirror flashed, and I was in that eye looking out. Around me, the vast blackness of the bird opened and lifted, and the earth fell away below us. All the feeble constructions of humankind and the smoke of its engines blurring into dimness and distance as we rose above the gray sky and into the brilliant clarity of the blue dome in which the present curved endlessly upon itself to compass past and future. Up we flew, high, high into the blue dome, then whistling down in a dizzying black-winged rush, we shot the long, long curve past faces huge and tiny on the flickering screen of memory, faces in the shadows, in the light, lips shaping words remembered and forgotten in the moving gleams of time, the wavering of candlelight, the whispering of gold watches, the boom of tower clocks, the fading ink of letters tied with faded ribbons, faces wheeling with horsemen and battles and cannon, marching with armies, screaming in burning cities, drowning in shipwrecks in the thunder of the wild black ocean, palimpsested voices, distant figures in the changing colors of processions, plagues, migrations, ruins, standing stones, cave drawings, jungles, deserts, dust, meteorites, dinosaurs, giant ferns, volcanoes, floods, blue-green algae, silence, the gray rain light in an empty room, the sound of my footsteps under yellow street lamps, and an unaccompanied cello from a long time ago. That's rather a long way to come for not very much, I said to the raven. With this kind of thing, it's always trial and error, said the raven. We can go a little farther if you want to. We might as well give it a try. All right, then here we go. Down, down we arrowed blackly through the silence and the rainlight and the footsteps and the street lamps and the unaccompanied cello to a dim and smoking red that seethed and crackled and bubbled and was veined with golden rivulets of lava. Down, down through that red to a dimmer red, a deeper silence, an older stillness. Where are we, I said. In the black. This isn't black, it's red. Sometimes the black is red. We have to walk from here. I looked down at the raven's worn and polished black feet. They seemed far, far away. I imagined the raven sitting down on the edge of its bed and lacing them up every morning. Far below me in the dim, dim red, the raven's left foot moved, and then its right. Is it very far, I said. It's where we are when we come to it. The raven's old man walk made its head lurch from side to side so that I swung like a pendulum in a black clock. We didn't talk. There wasn't anything to say. Sometimes the red was smooth. Sometimes it was gritty underfoot. Some kind of music would have been suitable for the gait of the raven, but there was no music. Do you come here often, I said. It isn't always here when I come. Well, yes, I could understand that. There were no landmarks at all, and the densities and textures of the red were probably unreliable. Time and silence receded before us steadily until they became the same as they were before. We were in a cavern dimly lit by the red and flickering light of our mind, the raven's and mine. Here, we said. What? Here, here, here. Our voice had become many voices, voices without number, tiny and great. The raven was no longer a raven, 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 nor was I what I had been. We were without form, we were not yet alive, tiny, tiny dancing giants, looming greatly in uncertain shapes and dwindling in the shadows, fast asleep and dancing in the dim red caverns of sleep. Through age-long dimnesses of red we danced and sang incessantly the long song of our sorting. Yes and no we sang in silence, grouping and dispersing and regrouping in the circles and the spirals of the sleep dance. Many, many sang the many of us, all of everything the same. We danced the red until it became red-orange, then we danced red-orange in the sameness of our unbeing. In the caverns of sleep we danced orange and orange-yellow while the mountains cooled under the long rains and the deeps filled up with oceans. When the yellow came and the yellow-green, it seemed that green and blue-green were only a matter of time. Same, same, sang we tiny, tiny dancing giants through all the colors of the years, all of us the same. What us, said some. All of us, said others. All of us what? All of us the same. Same what? Same us. What us? All of us. And so on through evolving repetitions over hundreds of thousands of millions of years. From time to time, there were attempts to move the discussion onto new ground, but always it reverted to the same revolving repetitions. Little by little, we were losing energy, and although I had at that time no identity, I was becoming more and more impatient with the apparent unwillingness of my fellow tiny, tiny dancing giants to pull themselves together so that we could make something of ourselves. My particles were beginning to scatter, when with a tremendous effort I said, "Un!" "Un what?" said the others. "Un the same," I said. "Unsame." "Same," insisted many. "Unsame," said more and more. Over the next hundreds of thousands of millions of years, this alternating challenge and response slowly developed in us a forward motion. We could feel ourselves moving out of unbeing into a new state. Same, unsame, we chanted all together as we surged forward through shallow seas and primordial salts into the blue-green algae of our beginning. Having begun, we pressed forward through floods, volcanoes, giant ferns, dinosaurs, meteorites, dust, deserts, jungles, cave drawings, standing stones, ruins, migrations, plagues, the changing colors of processions and distant figures, palimpsested voices, faces, huge and tiny on the flickering screen of memory, faces drowning in shipwrecks in the thunder of the wild black ocean, screaming in burning cities, marching with armies, wheeling with horsemen and battles and cannon, faces in the shadows and the light, lip-shaping words remembered and forgotten in the moving gleams of time, the whispering of gold watches, the boom of tower clocks, the fading ink of letters tied with faded ribbons. Nothing stopped us, and in time we arrived at the gray rain light in the empty room, the sound of my footsteps under yellow street lamps, and the unaccompanied cello from long ago, where the raven stood on its well-worn and polished black feet, looking at me through the chain-link mesh of the cage. "I wanted," said the raven, speaking to me with its mind, "to ask you about the black." "What can I tell you?" I said. "It's different things at different times, but it's more or less the same." I left the zoo and walked back the way I'd come. When I turned into the road where the trotting men had chanted, I saw them coming towards me again. Again the words were indistinct, probably not. "There is a thing, it has no name, this thing is everywhere the same. This thing is deep, this thing is wide, it hasn't got a farther side." I walked down Parkway, went down the long and windy escalator at Camden Town, came up out of the underground at my desk, but didn't sit down at it. I lay down on the couch, fell asleep, dreamed that I was writing, and woke up unable to remember what I'd written. Thank you. And to revert to explanation, well, see, the explanation of a story like that is that such an idea offers itself in certain colors and certain words, and it's not explicable, and that's what it is. And what I crave really is for more scholars and critics to make friends with the inexplicability of the human mind and accept the fact that images and colors and sounds come, and there are no rectangular scaffolding structures that you can fit them into. They just are what they are. I mean, I'm sure when you've studied poetry, I can't believe that some lecturer has not said to you that aside from what the poem is saying in its matter and in its sense, It is saying itself, which is beyond its matter and its sense. So there it is. Itself is not explicable. You know, if you're studying Dover Beach, the sea is calm tonight, the moon is full, the tide is full, the moon lies fair upon the straits, and you start analyzing it, it goes away. You don't want to get into who's talking to whom, or what the sea of faith is meant to symbolize, or what about Sophocles and so melancholy, long withdrawing roar. It is itself, and I think that the study of literature should encourage the recognition of the selfhood of art and of literature and of words and colors and sound. Yep.
You said the same thing about the dogs running the colors at Cambridge.
Yeah, that they are what they are, or that thing, that little fantasy that Ridley has about stone, about the stone men under the ground trying to stand up and they can't. I value very much these ideas that can't be explained and that enter the mind, and I don't think collectively we have made friends with our heads yet, and I think we need to. I really do. And I think that, well, I suppose every writer needs some reason to keep going, because I mean, certainly in my case, it's not making me rich, and it's not getting me multi-million-dollar film deals or anything like that. And I think I keep going because I really feel as if it wants to be done, that all of the ideas that are in the air and all of the colors and special effects they want us to be the organ of perception that perceives them. That's all. It's my religion. I'm a religious writer. Yeah.
What would you have us critics do with these things?
I suppose helpful critical work would be descriptive rather than analytical, so that if a critic works his or her way through a writer and can point out the course of that writer's revolving obsessions and could diagram the flow of ideas the way you would diagram a sentence, it would be helpful to people wanting to work out what that writer is about. A way of, I mean, just as there are Dickens catalogs and encyclopedias and Proust catalogs and encyclopedias where you can look up the characters in the various books and the places and so forth. So a kind of taxonomy would be helpful for writers, whereas misapplied critical structures are not. Because, see, what happens is that I'm always giving credit for more than I know. Elizabeth Dipple of Northwestern University has written a chapter about me in a book of hers called The Unresolvable Plot. And it's very flattering. You know, he said, Hoban has a peculiarly generous frame of reference. And by going back to old systems of numerology and Judaic manuscripts and this, I don't know anything about these things she's talking about, honestly. You know, I don't. I believe that when you tune into a certain idea, you're going to pick up things in the air that adhere to that idea. I think if you're a good artist, that happens. Happens in all the arts, that you tune into some main line of something that's moving through the air, and other things branch off it and attach onto it, and you end up with all kinds of references and that will fit into systems that you know nothing of. So that's what I think would be helpful criticism and commentary, simply to describe and diagram, as it were, the flow of ideas and images, and help the interested reader find the way through all these things.
Would it help the writer too?
Would it help the writer? Yeah. I have, I can't think of particular ones, but I have read writing about my work that gave me a better understanding for it and a better feeling about it. And I think, oh yeah, that is what I'm doing. You know? Yes?
you have elements of science fiction in most of your adult novels, and you mentioned you had worked on an earlier version of Pilgriman that you considered science fiction.
No, an earlier version of the Medusa frequency, and I've gone back to it, and that's what I'm working on now.
Oh, okay. I was interested in if you could explain your interest in science fiction as you earlier explained your interest in the horror genre.
Well, I don't know if I'm explaining it. I used to read years ago when I was working, during my first stint in advertising agencies in the 50s, I think. I used to read fantasy and science fiction in Galaxy, I think was the other magazine. And I always enjoyed science fiction, and I think one of the things that appealed to me in it is that it was mostly hopeful. I remember in particular a story, I don't remember who wrote it, a story about a space guy who got stranded on some planet and entered into a symbiotic relationship with the plant life there. So they were making oxygen for him, and he was making something for them, methane, I suppose, for them, whatever. And they got on together, you know, and they had a whole system going. And I can remember others where astronauts without their spacesuits would end up in space and they didn't die, you know, they somehow got through it. And there's a whole trend in science fiction to show the human animal surviving in seemingly impossible conditions and circumstances, and I always liked that about it. And, well, I was never that interested in it analytically, but, I mean, just the way the Western film has gone through many avatars. So first you had the good guys and the bad guys, and the good guys were the cowboys and the bad guys were the Indians, and then you had the enlightened intellectual Western where the good guys were the Indians and the bad guys were the cowboys, and then you had the psychological Westerns, you know, where the cowboy had an Oedipus fixation and one thing and another. So science fiction always mirrors its culture and its time, and is interesting that way. And then I can't explain, I just like it. I like hardware films too, like Alien or Aliens, and I love Blade Runner, and I even like RoboCop, you know, and I like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator. I love that Arnold Schwarzenegger. He didn't take any crap from anybody. Yeah.
Light as Rock that you started with, is that published?
Yeah, it was published. My sons, the Englishmen, my three sons that are living in London now, go to a school called St. Paul's in Barnes, and there's a school magazine, and they asked me to contribute something to it, so I gave them that. So it's published in the St. Paul's school magazine.
Is that attainable?
What I can do is, I can't leave this with you, but I'll get a copy to Alita Allison, and I'm happy for her to photocopy it as many times as she wants to.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And where is the story about the Raven?
Sorry?
Where is the about the Raven, the story about the
We
Raven?
can get them from Kinko's.
That isn't published.
No.
I'm still waiting for somebody to want that. Nobody wants it yet.
What about Perseus and Fay Ray? I was wondering
Yeah, that's...
why they didn't make it into the novel. And are you thinking about trying to publish that separately?
No, you can't be too commercial. You know, you can't publish everything. There have to be little things wandering in and out that just are themselves and don't go anywhere.
For the future scholars to publish it.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Were you going to read something from Pilgriman?
Tonight? Well, I tell you what did I bring? Let me, momentary pause for organization here. Put that there separately. And this is Riddley Walker separately. What I think I'll do, Pilgriman. Oh, I thought somebody was throwing bricks at the windows. You never know what kind of reaction you'll get. You know? What do you think, Carrie? Should I read from the published text, or do you want to hear background material that led to Pilgrimon? Unpublished. Never before until now.
How can we resist?
Yeah, all right. This is straight stuff, no fooling around. This is from my notebooks, and this is before I had any kind of a novel going with it. It's just the action in my head before a protagonist precipitated itself as Pilgrimon. So it's just little brief fragments with dates that reflect my reading and my thinking at the time. 14/3/80. This is the English way, so this is not in the 14th month. 14th of March, 1980. You have to come from far to see the close, because you can't see it from close. You can't bring the seeing to it. You have to come from far. Because I was looking for the life that has gone out of the world. The world is like the worn-out skull of a dead dog grinding its teeth in the dust. And the howling of that dead dog rings in my head, the howling of the dead bell of the world. Well, then, where should I look? Coming from far, where should I look? I was looking for the animal of things. I was looking for the bell of the world, to hear it ring again. Iron. How much real iron is there? Stone. Who hears the dance in it? Hears it with the eye. They eat nothing 3 times a day, because nothing's all there is to eat. 20th March. Reading Isaiah in the big Bible. The brass trumpeting of the type, the crash and swing, the fire and the flood, the golden, the mountain Byzantium of it. Yaldabaoth, the stupid creator god. Yaldabaoth, the son of Sophia. Yaldabaoth, the demiurge. Zamael, the creator god in the form of a lion. The idea of Christ turning to an onlooker under the hot sun and the heat shimmering on the rocks. What did you come out here to see? A reed shaken by the wind? A man clothed in soft raiment? Judah gone a-whoring with many shepherds. Thou hast sat for them by the wayside as a deserted crow, and hast defiled the land with thy fornications and thy wickedness. Jeremiah 3:2b, Jeremiah 11:19 from the Septuagint. But I, as an innocent lamb led to the slaughter, knew not. Against me they devised an evil device, saying, Come and let us put wood into his bread, and let us utterly destroy him from off the land of the living, and let his name not be remembered any more. Nothing in the left hand, nothing in the right. Pennies on a dead man's eyes won't keep out the light. It is the roaring of a dead lion. It is the weeping of a stone. It is the voice of the desert. World long, stretched out and turning on the turning world, icy head, icy feet, burning and rasping in between. 11 April. The bull vulture, the bird of horns. When the bird of horns comes, the sky is black with him, black with the bull vulture. When the bull vulture comes, his wings blacken the sky. The earth reeks with his semen. Nim, the Nim with death, Nim with the dead. Heracles in the lion's mouth, the moth in the black stone. Death made the world round. 16 April. This that we live is only a low degree of reality, depending on what you're tuned to or looking for. The lightning is 1 degree of reality, and the sky before and after it is another. The stone and the lightning illuminates the stone. If Jesus came as a sacrifice and a lamb to the slaughter, then someone was required to wield the knife to complete the act. If the sacrifice, one thing I'm not an allegory. Symbolic, to say that is meaningless. Everything refers to everything. Show me one thing that doesn't. Yaldabaoth is not well thought of, only a craftsman, a working class god. Still he did nice work. Look at a tree, look at a woman, look at the dawn. Everybody is so class conscious, so eager to say what's higher and what's lower. Higher, lower, more and less. Still, one can't help thinking that way. Look at reality. Reality, the whole picture in your eyes, the world in your mind. It isn't all one level, one class, one degree. Mostly what we're looking at is the very least degree of the thing. Gray streets and heartless roads, walking death. Anything really real, anything that makes you come alive and see, seems supernatural. There is the sky before the lightning, and then there is the lightning, the tiger. What went ye out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken with the wind? That's a good place to stop with those notes. But I wanted to read that kind of thing because, again, to emphasize that what I do doesn't come through rational thinking. It doesn't come through organization of structures. It's a a repetitive opening of the self to what will come in, and an encouragement to whatever is out there to elicit any kind of a response that will get me going, or keep me going if I'm started. I think, well, I can't say what's right for other people, but for me that's a practical way in art, is to try continually to be more and more responsive to what there is. That's why I especially like the small hours of the night. I like 3 o'clock in the morning when the bricks of the self move aside and things can come in through the chinks. Questions? If you like, I can read just the first paragraph of Pilgrimon to give a crystallization of those images into a narrator. I'll read the first 2 pages. That's short, and it gives you the idea of what's going to come, really. Pilgrimon here. I call myself Pilgrimon. It's a convenience. What my name was when I was walking around in the shape of a man, I don't know. I simply can't remember. What I am now is waves and particles. I don't need to walk around. I just go. When I want to appear, I turn up as an owl. When I see myself in my mind, I see myself flying silently across the face of a full moon that is wreathed in luminous clouds. Heath and swamp and wood below me, silvered rooftops, sleeping chimneys glide. Pilgrimon, the owl. The owl has always been big in my mind. Once as a boy I was in a ruin of some kind, old fire-blackened stones and burnt and rotted timbers. Twilight it was, the dying day shivering a little and huddling up in its cloak. Suddenly there came flying towards me with a mouse dangling from its beak, an owl, what is called a veiled owl, with a limp mouse dangling from its cryptic, heart-shaped face. Hear, O Israel, I cried, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Ah, the flickering in the darkness, the passage of what is called time. I don't know what I am now, a whispering out of the dust, dried blood on a sword, and the sword has crumbled into rust, and the wind has blown the rust away, but still I am. Still I am of the world, still I have something to say. How could it be otherwise? Nothing comes to an end. The action never stops, it only changes. The ringing of the steel is sung in the stillness of the stone. I speak from where I am. I speak from between the pieces. I speak from where Abram heard the voice of God. And it came to pass that when the sun went down and there was thick darkness, behold, a smoking furnace and a flaming torch that passed between these pieces. In that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram. A covenant with God is made from between the pieces of oneself. It's the only place where a covenant can happen. No covenant is possible until one has divided the heifer, the she-goat, the ram of oneself. The turtle dove and the young pigeon being the heart and soul, one of course does not divide them. When Abram sacrificed the animals of himself as instructed by God, a deep sleep fell upon him, and the dread and the great darkness from which God spoke. Then came the thick darkness after the sun went down, and in that darkness were the smoking furnace and the flaming torch that passed between the pieces. So here already was shown the main theme of the people of Abraham, the furnace and the torch, the consuming fire and the onward flame. If you measure with what is called time, it's a long way from here back to Abram's pieces, but still there is the division of the animals of us, still the thick darkness, the smoking furnace, the flaming torch, and still there are covenants to be made between the pieces, between one fire and another. I am only the waves and particles of such as I was, but I have a covenant with the Lord. The terms of it are simple. Everything is required of me forever. And the image of Pilgrimon as an owl is not an arbitrary one, because in the Middle Ages, the owl was regarded as being symbolic of the Jew. And on cathedrals all over England and in other places, you can see in wall carvings and on misericords, owls being mobbed by other birds, and in bestiaries, you can read descriptions of the owl as representing the Jew as the one who turned away from the light of Christ and as the bird of darkness. Also, you can see very Jewish-looking owls in the Luttrell Psalter, all of them needing a shave. But I think, I don't know if I had read that before I picked Pilgrimon, before you decided on the image of Pilgrimon as an owl. I can't be sure. But in any case, it's an example of the image that offers itself having some significance that you might not even have known of. Because Pilgrimon wanted to be an owl, as it came to me. Questions? Yeah.
Maybe you could read the last page or so of the Medusa frequency, because Herman does make friends with Medusa.
Oh, yeah.
It might be a nice way to wrap it up.
Okay. Well, the very end where he's quoting the Rilke, the last page.
Where she shows up on the screen and sort of winks at him and slippers in a friendly way. That might not be the very last page, man.
Well, this is the last page is he sees wait a minute. I think what you mean is the last page. I'll read you the last page. This is also very short. Title of chapter 28 is No More Klage. Klage is lament. It was the 4th of December and the Geburtstag of Rainer Maria Rilke, said the girl from Tirana on shortwave radio. And she went on to read Orpheus, Eurydice, Hermes. I'm always forgetting what I read, so the same lines can be new to me many times, as now when I heard her enchanting voice say, dass eine Welt aus Klage ward, in der alles noch einmal du war, Wald und Tal und Weg und Ortschaft, Feld und Fluss und Tier, und dass diese Klagewelt ganz so wie die andere Erde eine Sonne und ein gestirnter, stiller Himmel ging, ein Klagehimmel mit entstellten Sternen, that a world became out of lament in which everything existed once more, forest and valley and path and hamlet, field and river and animal, and that around this lament world, just as around the other earth, a sun and a starry quiet sky went, a lament sky with disfigured stars. As once before the words departed, and I heard only that sweet and promising voice of Eurydice, unfound and unlost. Right, I said, no more Klage. And when I looked up at the Vermeer girl, it was Medusa I saw, flickering and friendly, trusting me with the idea of her.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You've been a very good and responsive audience, and as I said, this is my first reading to an American audience, and very satisfying to me. Thank you.
Sure.